I was 24 when I bought the house that would eventually become my mother's weapon of choice. Back then, it looked like something out of a horror movie: peeling paint, rotted porch steps, windows so grimy you couldn't tell if anyone lived inside. The realtor actually apologized for showing it to me. My name is Amelia, and I've learned that sometimes the things that break you also make you unbreakable. Honey, this place is a money pit, Mom said when I called to tell her about the purchase. I could hear her stirring something on the stove, probably dinner for Tessa, who was still living at home at 20. You should be investing in a man, not some condemned shack. What happens when you want to get married? No decent man wants a woman who thinks she can do everything herself. I got a good deal, Mom. It has potential. She laughed, that particular laugh that always made my stomach clench. Potential to collapse on your head. Mark my words, you'll be begging me to help you out of this mess within 6 months. I hung up and stared at my new disaster. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. The yard looked like a jungle. But it was mine. Every rotted board, every broken tile, every dollar of the mortgage that would eat ramen noodles for the next 5 years. Mine. The restoration nearly killed me. I'm not being dramatic. I worked my day job in tech support, then came home to sand floors until midnight. My hands bled from pulling up carpet tacks. I learned to tile bathrooms from YouTube videos, crying from exhaustion as I laid each piece crooked, then ripped it up and started over. Still playing house? Tessa asked during one of her rare visits. She picked her way across the construction zone in designer heels I knew Mom had bought her. This is taking forever. Why don't you just hire someone? With what money? She shrugged. Ask Mom for a loan. She'd help if you asked nicely. I kept sanding. The worst part wasn't the physical exhaustion or the financial strain. It was the silence. No one came to help. No one brought me coffee or offered to hold a flashlight while I rewired outlets. When I posted progress photos on social media, Mom would comment things like, "Hope you're being careful, sweetie," or "Maybe call a professional for the electrical work," "Never great job," or "I'm proud of you." Tessa's comments were worse. "Wow, still working on this?" And "Looks exactly the same as last month." It took me 3 years. 3 years of bleeding knuckles and aching backs and learning that I could do things I never thought possible. The day I moved my last box out of my cramped apartment and into my renovated house, I sat on the front porch, the same porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and cried. Not from sadness, from pure, exhausted triumph. I lived there for 6 more years, adding touches that made it truly mine. A garden that actually grew vegetables, built-in bookshelves in the living room, a kitchen island I'd designed myself. Every improvement was proof that I could build something beautiful from nothing. When I finally saved enough to buy my dream condo downtown, I kept the house. It was my safety net, my backup plan, my monument to everything I'd accomplished without anyone's help. I figured I'd rent it out eventually, maybe sell it when the market was right. I should have known Mom was watching, calculating, waiting. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was unpacking boxes in my new place. I almost didn't answer. I was exhausted from moving, and conversations with Mom required energy I didn't have. "Amelia, honey, I've been thinking about that old house of yours." "What about it?" "Well, you're not using it anymore, are you? And Tessa's been having such a hard time since she lost her job. She needs a fresh start, somewhere she can really focus on getting her life together." I set down the box I was holding. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I think it would be wonderful if you gifted the house to your sister. Think of it as an early inheritance. She needs it more than you do right now, and you've got that fancy new condo. It's the generous thing to do." The words hit me like ice water. "You want me to give Tessa my house." "Our family takes care of each other, Amelia. You've always been the strong one, the independent one. Tessa needs more support. This would really help her get on her feet." I stared at my reflection in the dark window of my new condo. The woman looking back at me had calloused hands and tired eyes, but she was nobody's fool. I'll think about it, Mom. Oh, wonderful. I'll let Tessa know. She's going to be so excited. The line went dead, and I realized my mother had never actually asked me a question. She'd made a statement, assumed compliance, and hung up before I could object. That's when I knew the war had officially begun. Mom's text arrived at 7 a.m. sharp. Brunch at 10. We need to discuss the house situation. Don't be late. The house situation. Like my decade of sweat equity was just a minor logistical issue to resolve over mimosas. I showed up to find them already seated at Mom's favorite spot, the kind of place where everything costs twice what it should, and the waitresses call you Han while judging your outfit. Tessa was practically glowing, scrolling through Pinterest boards on her phone. "Look at these kitchen ideas," she said without looking up. "I'm thinking farmhouse chic. Maybe knock out that wall between the kitchen and living room to open things up." "That's a load-bearing wall," I said, sliding into the booth. "We can figure that out later." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "The important thing is that Tessa has a vision. She's so excited about this fresh start." The waitress appeared. "What can I get you ladies?" "Just coffee for me," I said. "Oh, come on." Tessa finally looked up from her phone. "We're celebrating. Get the French toast. My treat." She grinned. "Well, technically your treat, since you're giving me a house." "I never said I was giving you anything." The smile faltered. Mom jumped in immediately. "Amelia, we talked about this. Family helps family. You don't even live there anymore." "I don't live in my car anymore either, but that doesn't mean I'm giving it away." "That's completely different." Tessa's voice had that whiny edge it got when she didn't get her way immediately. "A car isn't a home. I need somewhere to live, and you have 2 places now. So get a job and rent an apartment like everyone else. I'm trying to find work, but the market is terrible right now, and rent prices are insane. Do you know how much a decent 1-bedroom costs? Do you know how much I spent renovating that house?" Mom cleared her throat. "Girls, let's not fight about money. This is about family, about doing what's right." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "Actually, I took the liberty of having some paperwork drawn up, just to make things official." My blood went cold. "What kind of paperwork?" "Nothing complicated, just a simple transfer of ownership. I know how busy you are with your new job and everything, so I handled the details." She slid the folder across the table. I opened it and stared at what looked like a deed transfer document. My name was listed as the current owner, with Tessa's name typed in as the new recipient. "You had legal documents prepared without talking to me first?" "I wanted to surprise you, show you how easy the whole process could be." I flipped through the pages. Everything looked official: letterhead, notary stamps, the works. But something felt wrong. The paper quality was off, and there were small formatting inconsistencies. "Where did you get this done?" "A friend of mine knows someone who handles real estate transactions. Very reasonable rates." "Mom, you can't just transfer property ownership with paperwork from someone who handles real estate. This isn't how any of this works." Tessa leaned forward. "Why are you being so difficult? It's just a house." "Just a house?" My voice came out louder than I intended. The couple at the next table glanced over. "I spent 3 years of my life rebuilding that place from the ground up. I nearly went broke doing it. I bled on those floors." "And now you can help your sister," Mom said smoothly. "Think of it as paying it forward. Someday when Tessa's successful, she'll help you with something." I looked at my sister, who was back to scrolling through Pinterest. "What exactly are your plans for becoming successful, Tessa?" "I'm exploring my options. Maybe start a lifestyle blog, or get into real estate myself. I'd have a great story about renovation and design." "Using my renovation as your story." "Our family's story," Mom corrected. "We all contributed to your success, Amelia. The least you can do is share it." I closed the folder and stood up. "I need to think about this." "There's nothing to think about," Tessa said. "Just sign the papers. I already told Santiago he could move in next month." "Santiago?" My boyfriend. You'd like him. He's really handy. He can help with the renovations I want to do. I stared at her. You're planning to move your boyfriend into my house before I've even agreed to give it to you? It's not like you're using it. I left $20 on the table and walked out. Behind me I could hear Mom calling my name, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking as I got into my car. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then I drove straight to the house. The lockbox was still there, hidden behind the porch light where I'd left it. I let myself in and walked through the rooms I'd built with my own hands. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, clean, quiet, waiting. I was about to leave when I noticed something on the kitchen counter. A copy of the deed transfer document from brunch. But this one was different. My name had been whited out with correction fluid, and Tessa's name written over it in blue ink. They weren't just asking me to give up my house. They were planning to take it whether I agreed or not. I took photos of the forged document with my phone, then drove home to my condo. My laptop was still packed in a box somewhere, but I needed to check something immediately. I opened my email on my phone and scrolled through the messages from the past few days. There it was, an automated notification from the county title office, flagged as urgent. Fraudulent ownership change detected. Property protection protocols activated. I smiled for the first time all day. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who thought their paperwork looked suspicious. The sign started small. I should have paid attention earlier, but I was distracted by the move and my new job. When you trust someone with your house keys, you don't expect them to treat your home like a personal shopping mall. I'd let Tessa stay at the house temporarily 3 months ago when she got evicted from her apartment. Just until she found work, she'd promised. Just until she got back on her feet. The first thing I noticed missing was my grandmother's china cabinet. I'd restored it myself, stripping layers of paint to reveal the original wood underneath. When I asked Tessa about it, she said she'd moved it to make room for her yoga mat. Where did you move it to? Storage unit. Don't worry, it's safe. But when I asked for the storage unit address, she got vague. Said she'd have to look it up. Never did. Next came the antique mirror from the hallway. Then the vintage lamp I'd found at an estate sale. Each time Tessa had a reasonable explanation. She was decluttering, or creating better energy flow, or making space for her art projects. The art projects turned out to be vision boards made from magazine cutouts, pictures of expensive cars and designer handbags taped to poster board. Very inspiring. I started dropping by unannounced. That's when I found Santiago. He was sprawled on my couch in his underwear, eating cereal from one of my good bowls while watching Netflix on the TV I'd mounted myself. Beer cans covered the coffee table I'd built from reclaimed wood. "Oh, hey," he said without looking away from the screen. "You must be the sister. Tessa's at the store." "And you are?" "Santiago, Tessa's boyfriend. She said I could crash here for a few days while I look for work." A few days turned into a few weeks. Santiago had no job, no car, and apparently no concept of basic hygiene. He left dirty dishes everywhere, tracked mud through the house, and somehow managed to clog every drain in the place. When I confronted Tessa, she got defensive. "He's going through a rough patch. His roommate kicked him out, and he doesn't have anywhere else to go." "This isn't a homeless shelter, Tessa. It's my house. You're not even living here. What's the big deal?" The big deal became clear when I got the utility bills. Electric, $400. Water, $300. Gas, $250. For a house that should have been using minimal utilities. "What are you people doing in there? Running a grow operation?" "Santiago likes long showers, and we've been having friends over. You know, being social, building community. Building community with my electricity." I called the utility companies and discovered the bills hadn't been paid in 2 months. My credit was taking a hit because Tessa had promised to handle the utilities and then just didn't. That's when I called Benjamin. We'd dated for 2 years before realizing we made better friends than lovers. He was a real estate attorney now, successful enough to have his own practice but still willing to take my calls when I needed legal advice. Amelia, what's going on? You sound stressed. I need to ask you something hypothetically. If someone was staying in my house and I wanted them out, what would that process look like? Are they paying rent? No. Do they have a lease? No. How long have they been there? 3 months. Benjamin was quiet for a moment. In most states, after 30 days, they'd be considered tenants even without a lease. You'd have to go through formal eviction proceedings. Even if they're not paying anything? Even then. But Amelia, why are we talking hypothetically? What's really going on? I told him everything. The missing furniture, the unpaid bills, Santiago, the forged deed transfer documents from brunch. Wait, stop. They showed you forged ownership papers? Mom claims she had them prepared by someone who handles real estate. But they looked fake, and I got an alert from the county about fraudulent activity. Amelia, this isn't just family drama anymore. If they're attempting to fraudulently transfer property ownership, that's a felony. You need to document everything. I already took pictures of the whited-out deed. Good. What else do you have? I walked him through the timeline. The missing items, the utility bills, the unauthorized occupant. Benjamin took notes. I'm going to prepare some paperwork for you. A cease and desist letter, and I want to set up a living trust for the property. It'll make it much harder for anyone to claim ownership fraudulently. How much will that cost? For you? Nothing. Consider it payment for all those times you helped me move furniture. After we hung up, I drove back to the house. I needed to see the damage for myself. The front yard looked like a junkyard. Santiago's broken motorcycle sat on blocks near the porch. Empty beer bottles lined the steps. The garden I'd spent years cultivating was trampled and dying. Inside was worse. Food stains covered the hardwood floors I'd refinished by hand. Cigarette burns marked the kitchen counter. Someone had punched a hole in the living room wall. I was taking pictures of the damage when I heard voices outside. Tessa and Santiago were coming up the walk, arguing about something. Told you she'd be cool with it, Santiago was saying. She's being weird about everything lately, ever since Mom mentioned the transfer. Maybe we should just change the locks, make it official. We can't do that yet, not until the paperwork goes through. I slipped out the back door and around to my car. As I drove away, I saw them settling in for another evening of destroying everything I'd built. That night, I signed the living trust documents Benjamin had prepared. The property was now legally protected in ways that would make any attempted theft much more complicated. I also did something else. I set up a security camera system that would send alerts directly to my phone. If they wanted to play games with my house, I was going to have evidence of every move they made. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Tessa says you stopped by today but didn't say hello. That's rude, honey. We're family. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Family doesn't steal from each other. Her response came immediately. Don't be dramatic. Nobody's stealing anything. We're trying to help you make a generous decision. I screenshot the conversation and added it to the folder I was building. Benjamin was right. I needed to document everything, because something told me this was just the beginning. The Facebook invitation showed up on a Thursday. Tessa's housewarming party. Come celebrate my new place. The address was my house. I screenshot the invitation and sent it to Benjamin with a message. They're throwing a party to celebrate stealing my property. His response was immediate. Document everything. I'm filing the restraining order tomorrow. Saturday afternoon, I parked across the street and watched cars fill my driveway. People I didn't recognize carried gift bags and bottles of wine up to my front door. Tessa stood on the porch in a flowing sundress, greeting guests like she was the lady of the manor. Welcome to my little sanctuary, I heard her tell someone. It's taken so much work to make it feel like home. My work, my sanctuary. But apparently now, it was hers. I waited until the party was in full swing before walking over. The front door was propped open, and I could see people scattered throughout the rooms I'd built with my own hands. Someone had hung string lights where my family photos used to be. The furniture was completely different. Cheap pieces that clashed with the carefully chosen paint colors I'd spent weeks selecting. "Amelia!" Tessa spotted me from across the room. "You came. I wasn't sure you'd show up." "Wouldn't miss it. This is quite the celebration." "Isn't it amazing? I've put so much love into this place already. Come see what I've done with the kitchen." She led me through the crowd like a tour guide. The kitchen island I'd designed and built myself was covered with store-bought decorations. Someone had stuck adhesive hooks all over the backsplash I'd tiled by hand. "I'm thinking of painting the cabinets," Tessa said. "Maybe a bright turquoise, really make a statement." "Those cabinets are solid wood. I stripped and refinished them myself." "I know, but they're so dark and traditional. I want something more modern, more me." A woman I didn't recognize joined our conversation. "Tessa, this place is gorgeous. You're so lucky to have inherited such a beautiful home." "Inherited?" I looked at Tessa. She laughed nervously. "Well, you know, family property. It's been in the family for years. Actually, I bought this house 9 years ago and renovated it myself." The woman looked confused. "Oh, I thought—" Tessa said her grandmother left it to her. Our grandmother died when Tessa was 12. She lived in a rental apartment. Tessa grabbed my arm. "Can I talk to you privately?" She pulled me toward the back bedroom, my old office, now apparently Santiago's gaming setup. Empty energy drink cans covered the desk where I used to pay bills and plan renovation projects. "Why are you being like this?" she hissed once we were alone. "Like what? Honest?" "You're embarrassing me in front of my friends." "Your friends think you inherited this house from a dead grandmother." I had to tell them something. I couldn't exactly say my sister was giving it to me out of guilt. Guilt about what? About having everything while I have nothing. About being Mom's favorite. About never having to struggle like I do. I stared at her. "Tessa, I worked 3 jobs to buy this house. I ate ramen for 2 years straight. I haven't been on vacation in a decade because every spare dollar went into this place. But it was easy for you. You're good at that stuff. I'm not. It wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. The point is, you don't need it anymore. You have your fancy condo now. That I also worked for. That I also earned. God, you're so selfish. Do you know how humiliating it is to be 30 years old and have to ask your sister for help? Then don't ask. Get a job. Pay your own way." "It's not that simple. The economy is terrible. Nobody's hiring, and Santiago's been really depressed lately." "Santiago isn't my problem." "He's my boyfriend. My problems are your problems." That's what family means. I walked back toward the main room, Tessa following behind me. The party was getting louder, more chaotic. Someone had spilled red wine on the hardwood floors I'd refinished 3 times to get perfect. I was heading for the door when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Hanging around the neck of a woman near the kitchen was a delicate silver necklace with a small blue stone. I recognized it immediately. "Excuse me," I said to the woman. "That's a beautiful necklace." "Thank you. Tessa gave it to me. She said it was a family heirloom she wanted to share." The necklace had belonged to my great-aunt Whitney, Mom's half-sister who'd been cast out of the family when I was 16. Whitney had given it to me before she left, telling me to keep it safe because it was the only thing she had left of their grandmother. "Tessa," I called across the room. "Can I see you for a minute?" She bounced over, wineglass in hand. "Having fun?" "I knew you'd love what I've done with the place." "Where did you get Whitney's necklace?" Her face went blank. "What necklace?" "The one you just gave to your friend. The silver one with the blue stone." "Oh, that old thing. I found it in one of the jewelry boxes upstairs. I figured it was just costume jewelry." "That necklace belonged to Whitney. She gave it to me specifically." "Whitney? Mom's crazy sister? Why would you want anything from her?" "Because she's not crazy." "And that necklace wasn't yours to give away." Amelia, you're making a scene. It's just a necklace. But it wasn't just a necklace. It was a connection to the one family member who'd ever stood up to Mom's manipulation. Whitney had been erased from family photos, banned from holidays, written out of stories like she'd never existed. And now Tessa was casually giving away the only thing I had left of her. I walked over to the woman wearing the necklace. "I'm sorry, but there's been a mistake. That necklace was stolen from me. I'm going to need it back." The woman looked mortified. She unclasped it immediately and handed it to me. "I had no idea." Tessa said, "I know what she said. Thank you for understanding." I headed for the door, the necklace clutched in my fist. Behind me, I could hear Tessa trying to explain to her guests, her voice getting higher and more frantic. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the necklace. Then I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in 17 years. I searched for Whitney's contact information online. It took me an hour of digging through social media and public records, but I found her. She was living in Oregon now, working as a librarian. Her Facebook profile showed a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, surrounded by books and cats. I sent her a message. "Hi, Whitney. This is Amelia, Rosalind's daughter. I know it's been a long time, but I have something that belongs to you. And I think it's time you knew the truth about what's been happening with our family." Her response came back within minutes. "Amelia, I've wondered about you girls for years. I'd love to hear from you. When can we talk?" I looked back at the house where Tessa's party was still going strong. People were celebrating her new life in the home I'd built with my own hands, wearing jewelry she'd stolen from me, believing lies she'd told about inheritance and family history. "How about now?" I typed back. "I have a story I think you'll want to hear, and maybe a gift you'll want to accept." Whitney and I talked for 3 hours that night. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm but cautious, like someone who'd learned not to trust too easily. "Your mother told everyone I stole money from your grandmother's estate," she said. "Made me out to be some kind of criminal. The truth was, I found documents proving Rosalind had been forging your grandmother's signature on checks for months before she died." "What happened when you confronted her?" "She turned the whole family against me, said I was jealous, unstable, making up stories for attention. By the time I could prove anything, your grandmother was gone, and Rosalind had control of everything. I remember you trying to talk to me at the funeral. You were just a kid. I didn't want to drag you into adult problems. But I always wondered what kind of woman you'd become, whether you'd end up like her. I'm starting to think I might be more like you than I realized." The next morning, I got a call from Benjamin. "They filed the deed transfer yesterday," he said without preamble. "Tessa and your mother went to the county office with their forged documents. What happens now? Now they find out that the property is held in a living trust, which makes their paperwork worthless, but they don't know that yet. How long before they figure it out? Could be days, could be weeks, depends on how thoroughly they researched property law before attempting fraud." I was getting ready for work when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Amelia, we need to talk. There seems to be some kind of problem with the house transfer." "What kind of problem?" "The county office is saying there are complications. Something about a trust? I don't understand all the legal jargon, but they're refusing to process the paperwork." "Huh, that's weird. Don't play dumb with me. What did you do?" "I protected my property, like any reasonable person would." Her voice got that sharp edge it always had when she was losing control. "This is ridiculous, Amelia. We're trying to do something nice for your sister, and you're sabotaging it with legal technicalities." "Legal technicalities like actual ownership? You know what I mean. Stop being difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm being careful. There's a difference." She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, Tessa called. "What the hell did you do? The county office says our paperwork is invalid." "Maybe because it's forged?" "It's not forged. Mom had it prepared by a professional." "What professional? What's their name?" Silence. "Tessa, if this was legitimate, you'd have the name of the attorney who prepared it. You'd have receipts. You'd have proper documentation. We don't need receipts to transfer family property. It's not family property, it's my property. God, you're such a bitch about this. Fine. We'll get a real lawyer. We'll sue you if we have to. Go ahead. I'd love to see you explain to a judge why you think you're entitled to steal my house. She hung up too. I was starting to see a pattern. That afternoon, Benjamin called again. I sent them a cease and desist letter. Certified mail, signature required. They should get it tomorrow. What does it say? The usual. Stop attempting to fraudulently transfer property ownership, remove all unauthorized occupants from the premises, return any stolen items, standard stuff. Think they'll comply? Based on what you've told me about these people? Absolutely not. Which is why I'm also filing for a restraining order and preparing trespass charges. This is really happening, isn't it? Amelia, they committed fraud. Multiple felonies, actually. This stopped being a family dispute the moment they forged legal documents. That evening, I drove by the house again. Santiago's motorcycle was still in the front yard, but now there was a moving truck in the driveway. I parked and watched as he and another guy loaded furniture, my furniture, into the back. I called the police. I'd like to report a theft in progress, I told the dispatcher. Someone is removing property from my house without permission. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes. I met the officers at the curb and showed them my identification and property deed. Those men are removing items that belong to me, I explained. They don't have permission to be on the property. Officer Martinez looked at the moving truck, then back at me. Do you have documentation proving ownership of the specific items? I pulled out my phone and showed him photos I'd taken during the renovation, pictures that clearly showed the furniture in question. Ma'am, we're going to need to sort this out. Can you call the people inside and ask them to come out here? Santiago emerged from the house looking confused and annoyed. What's going on? Sir, this woman claims you're removing property that belongs to her. Can you show us documentation proving ownership of the items in the truck? Those are Tessa's things. She lives here now. Where is Tessa? At work. And you are? Her boyfriend, Santiago. Officer Martinez looked at me. Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing this man has permission to be on your property? No, because he doesn't. Sir, I'm going to need you to stop loading the truck until we can get this sorted out. Santiago's face went red. This is bullshit. Tessa owns this house now. Her mom gave it to her. Do you have paperwork showing the property transfer? It's being processed. The officers exchanged glances. Officer Martinez turned back to me. Ma'am, would you like to press trespassing charges? Yes, and I want him removed from the property immediately. Sir, you need to leave the premises, now. What about my stuff? What stuff? I asked. Everything in that truck belongs to me. I have photos proving it. Santiago looked like he wanted to argue, but the presence of 2 armed police officers seemed to change his mind. He grabbed a backpack from the porch and stalked off down the street. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said, I'd recommend changing the locks immediately. And if these people continue to harass you, don't hesitate to call us. As the police cars pulled away, I stood in front of my house, really looked at it for the first time in months. The damage was worse than I'd thought. The garden was completely destroyed. The front porch railing was broken. Someone had spray-painted graffiti on the side wall. But it was still mine, still standing, still salvageable. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed that afternoon. Then I called Whitney. How would you feel about taking a trip to visit your old hometown? I asked. I think it's time for a family reunion. Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee in my condo when my phone buzzed with a security alert. The cameras I'd installed showed a moving truck pulling into my driveway, followed by Mom's silver sedan and Tessa's beat-up Honda. I grabbed my keys and drove over, parking across the street where I had a clear view. 3 men in work clothes were unloading furniture pads and dollies while Tessa directed them like a general commanding troops. The couch goes in the living room, obviously, she was saying. And be careful with that mirror, it's an antique. Mom stood on the porch with her phone pressed to her ear. Pastor Williams, I need your help with a family situation. My daughter is having some kind of breakdown and won't let her sister into the house we gave her. I called Benjamin. They're here with a moving truck, and Mom's making phone calls. Are they trying to get inside? Not yet. They're just unloading stuff in the driveway. Stay where you are. Document everything. I'm on my way. One of the movers approached the front door and tried the handle. When it didn't open, he looked back at Tessa. Lady, you said you had keys. I do have keys. These locks must be broken or something. She pulled out a keychain and tried several different keys. None of them worked. Maybe we should call a locksmith, suggested one of the other movers. No, Mom said, ending her phone call. This is our property. We don't need a locksmith. She marched up to the front door and started pounding on it. Amelia, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. When no one answered, she tried the windows, all locked. She walked around to the back of the house, Tessa following behind her. Mom, maybe we should just wait until she gets here, Tessa said. We can explain everything. Explain what? That we're moving you into your own house? There's nothing to explain. They came back around to the front, both looking frustrated. Mom pulled out her phone again. Hello, police? I need someone to come help us get into our house. The locks have been changed illegally. I watched her pace back and forth while she talked, gesturing wildly with her free hand. Yes, it's a family property dispute. My daughter changed the locks to keep her sister out of the house we transferred to her. It's harassment. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Martinez got out, the same cop who'd dealt with Santiago the week before. He recognized me immediately when I walked over. Ma'am, didn't we just handle a situation here last week? Same people, different day. He approached Mom and Tessa, who were standing by the moving truck looking official and wronged. Ladies, I understand there's a dispute about property access? Officer, this is my daughter's house, Mom said, pointing at Tessa. We transferred ownership to her last month, but my other daughter changed the locks illegally to keep her out. Do you have documentation of the ownership transfer? Mom fumbled in her purse and pulled out the same forged papers from brunch. Officer Martinez looked them over, then looked at me. Ma'am, do you have documentation showing current ownership? I handed him the deed and the living trust papers Benjamin had prepared. He studied them carefully. Ma'am, he said to Mom, these transfer documents you're showing me aren't legally valid. The property is held in a trust, which means any ownership changes would have to go through the trust administrator. That's impossible. We filed these papers with the county. You may have filed them, but that doesn't make them legal. And according to these trust documents, this woman, he pointed at me, is the sole trustee and beneficiary. Tessa's face went white. But Mom said, I don't care what Mom said, Officer Martinez interrupted. What I care about is what the legal documents say. And they say this property belongs to her. He pointed at me again. This is ridiculous. Mom's voice was getting shrill. We're family. She can't just lock us out. Ma'am, she can absolutely lock you out. It's her property. But we have a moving truck. We have movers. We've spent money on this. That's not a police matter. That's between you and your family. One of the movers approached us. Look, lady, we've been here for an hour. Are we moving this stuff or not? Because we charge by the hour. Yes, you're moving it, Tessa snapped. Just give us a minute to figure out the key situation. There is no key situation, I said. You don't have keys because you don't live here. I do live here. I've been living here for months. Illegally, as a squatter, which is why I had the locks changed. Mom stepped between us. Amelia, stop this nonsense. We're trying to help your sister get her life together. Why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel. I'm protecting my property from theft. Theft? Mom laughed, but it sounded forced. How is it theft when we're family? Because being related to someone doesn't give you the right to steal from them. Officer Martinez cleared his throat. Ladies, I need to make something clear. This property legally belongs to this woman. He pointed at me. Anyone attempting to enter without her permission would be trespassing. Anyone attempting to remove items from the property would be committing theft. Are we all clear on that? The movers started loading everything back onto the truck without waiting for an answer. Wait! Tessa ran after them. You can't just leave. We paid you! Lady, we can't move stuff into a house you don't have legal access to. That's not how this works. Mom pulled out her phone again. I'm calling our lawyer. What lawyer? I asked. The same professional who prepared your fake documents? She glared at me but didn't answer. Instead, she dialed a number and walked away from the group. Uncle Robert? It's Roslyn. I need your help with a legal situation. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see Mom's face getting redder as she talked. Finally, she hung up and came back over. Our family attorney says we need to file a formal complaint. This isn't over, Amelia. You're right, I said. It's not over, but it's also not going the way you planned. As they drove away, Mom, Tessa, and the moving truck full of furniture they couldn't deliver, I noticed a car I didn't recognize pulling up to the curb. Whitney got out, looking exactly like her Facebook photos, but somehow more real. She was smaller than I remembered, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She walked up to me with a hesitant smile. Hello, Amelia. It's been a long time. Whitney, you made it. She looked at the house, then back at me. So this is the place that's causing all the trouble. This is it. My money pit. My masterpiece. My battlefield. It's beautiful. I can see why they want it. They can want it all they like. Wanting and having are two different things. Whitney smiled. A real smile this time, not hesitant at all. I think your grandmother would have been proud of you. The grandmother they said you stole from? That one. She always said the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Whitney looked at the house again. I think she was right. Whitney and I had been meeting secretly for 2 weeks. Coffee shops, park benches, anywhere Mom wouldn't think to look for us. Each conversation revealed another layer of family history I'd never known. Your mother was always jealous of me, Whitney said during our 3rd meeting. I was younger, got better grades, had more friends. When our grandmother got sick, Roslyn saw an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Grandmother had dementia. Some days she was sharp as ever, other days she didn't recognize us. Roslyn started visiting more often, bringing papers for her to sign. Just updating your will, Grandma. Making sure everything's in order. And you found out? I found the bank statements, thousands of dollars in withdrawals, all signed with Grandmother's shaky signature. When I confronted Roslyn, she said I was imagining things, said grief was making me paranoid. But you had proof. I had copies of everything. Bank records, forged signatures, even a recording of Grandmother on one of her good days saying she never authorized any of those withdrawals. Whitney pulled out her phone and scrolled through old files. I still have some of it. Digital copies. Your mother thought destroying the paper trail would make it all go away. That's when I told her about my plan. I want to transfer the house to you, I said. Legally, permanently. Whitney nearly choked on her coffee. Amelia, I can't accept that. It's your home. It's my weapon, and I want it in the hands of someone who understands what it's like to have family steal from you. But it's worth. I know what it's worth. I also know what justice is worth, and right now, justice is worth more to me than money. We spent the next week working with Benjamin to prepare the transfer documents. Real ones this time, with proper legal language and notarized signatures. Are you sure about this? Benjamin asked me privately. Once this goes through, you can't change your mind. I'm sure. Whitney deserves something good to come out of all the pain Mom caused her, and Mom deserves to see that her actions have consequences. The final meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Whitney would arrive at the house at exactly 2 p.m. I'd be there with the signed transfer documents. Benjamin would handle the legal mechanics remotely. At 1:45, I was sitting in my car across from the house when Mom and Tessa pulled up. They'd brought reinforcements this time. Uncle Robert, Mom's brother-in-law, who was supposedly a lawyer, but mostly handled traffic tickets and small claims disputes. "The locks are still changed," Tessa said, trying the front door again. "That's fine," Uncle Robert said. "We'll handle this properly. I've prepared an injunction to force her to provide access." "An injunction based on what?" I asked, walking up behind them. They all turned around. Uncle Robert stepped forward, trying to look official in his wrinkled suit. "Amelia, I'm here representing your mother and sister in this property dispute. We need to resolve this situation before it gets out of hand." "It's already out of hand. They tried to steal my house with forged documents. Now, that's a serious accusation." "Do you have proof these documents were forged?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of the whited-out deed. "Here's your proof: correction fluid and blue ink over a photocopied document." Uncle Robert studied the photos, his confidence visibly deflating. "Well, there may have been some irregularities in the preparation process, but the intent was legitimate. Intent doesn't matter when the action is fraud." "Amelia, be reasonable," Mom said. "We're family. We can work this out without involving lawyers and courts and all this legal nonsense. You involved lawyers the moment you tried to forge ownership documents. You involved courts the moment you filed fraudulent paperwork with the county. This stopped being a family matter when you decided to commit felonies." "Felonies?" Tessa's voice cracked. "Mom, you said this was all legal." "It is legal," Uncle Robert said. "I said the transfer could be legal if done properly," Uncle Robert interrupted. "I never said anything about forging documents or changing names on existing deeds." A car pulled up to the curb. Whitney got out, carrying a small leather briefcase. She walked toward us with the same quiet confidence I remembered from childhood. Mom went completely still. All the color drained from her face. "Hello, Roslyn," Whitney said calmly. "It's been a long time. What is she doing here?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "I invited her," I said. "Whitney, these are the people I told you about. Mom, Tessa, Uncle Robert. Meet Whitney, the woman you've been calling a thief and a liar for 17 years. Whitney opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I brought some old family documents I thought you might find interesting, Roslyn. Bank records, mostly. From grandmother's account. Those are fake. I had them destroyed years ago. You had the originals destroyed, but I made copies. Digital copies. They're quite clear about what really happened to grandmother's money." Uncle Robert looked confused. "What money? What's she talking about?" "Nothing," Mom said quickly. "She's delusional. She always has been." "Delusional enough to keep 17 years' worth of evidence?" Whitney pulled out a tablet and showed Uncle Robert a series of bank statements. "These show systematic theft from an elderly woman with dementia, forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, fraudulent power of attorney documents." Uncle Robert studied the screen, his face growing serious. "Roslyn, what is this?" "It's lies. All lies. The bank records are lies. The handwriting analysis is lies. The medical records showing grandmother's mental state are lies. I don't have to listen to this." Mom turned toward her car. "Actually, you do," I said. "Because Whitney isn't just here to share old family history. She's here to accept a gift." I pulled out the transfer documents Benjamin had prepared. "As of today, this property legally belongs to Whitney, all of it. The house, the land, everything." Tessa stared at the papers. "You can't do that. You can't just give away a house. I can do whatever I want with my property, and what I want is to give it to someone who deserves it. She doesn't deserve anything." Mom's composure finally cracked completely. "She's not even real family. She's a half-sister, a mistake, a victim of your theft and manipulation," Whitney said quietly. "Just like your daughters are becoming." Mom whirled around to face me. You would rather give your house to her than to your own sister? Your own flesh and blood? You taught me that blood doesn't mean much when it comes with conditions and manipulation. Whitney never asked me for anything, never tried to steal from me, never lied to me or about me. This is insane, Tessa said. Mom, do something. Stop her. I can't stop her. It's done. Mom looked at Whitney with pure hatred. You always were poison to this family. No, Roslyn. I was the antidote, and apparently, so is your daughter. Whitney took the keys I offered her and walked up to the front door of the house. She unlocked it and stepped inside, then turned back to face us. You left me with nothing once, she said to Mom. Told everyone I was a thief and a liar. Made me lose my family, my inheritance, my place in the world. She looked around at the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that was now hers. Karma brought me home. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 days. Then the phone calls started, angry, desperate, pleading. She left 17 voicemails the first night alone. Amelia, you have to fix this. Your sister is devastated. She's talking about moving across the country. Is that what you want? To destroy our family over a house? Tessa's approach was different. She showed up at my condo building at 6 in the morning, buzzing my apartment until security asked her to leave. Please, she said when I finally answered the intercom. Can we just talk? I know I messed up, but I'm your sister. That has to count for something. It counted for 9 years of free housing and utilities. It counted for every piece of furniture you stole and every bill you didn't pay. What more do you want it to count for? I want it to count for forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending theft didn't happen. The extended family reactions were mixed. Some cousins called to tell me I'd gone too far. Others admitted they'd been waiting for someone to stand up to Mom for years. She pulled the same crap with Dad's inheritance, my cousin Marcus told me. Convinced him to change his will right before he died, then acted surprised when the rest of us got nothing. Why didn't anyone say anything? Because she's family. Because it's easier to keep the peace. Because we told ourselves it wasn't worth fighting about. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe some fights are worth having. Benjamin called with updates on the legal situation. The county flagged their fraudulent filing for investigation. If they pursue charges, your mother and sister could face felony fraud convictions. Will they pursue charges? Depends on how much evidence the prosecutor thinks they have. But between the forged documents, the recorded admissions, and the pattern of behavior, they have a pretty strong case. And if they don't? Then your family learned a very expensive lesson about the difference between wanting something and being entitled to it. Whitney settled into the house like she'd been meant to live there all along. She kept most of my renovations but added her own touches. Bookshelves in every room, a herb garden where the lawn used to be, wine chimes on the front porch that played soft melodies in the evening breeze. I never thought I'd have a real home again, she told me over tea in the kitchen I'd built. After your mother destroyed my reputation, I spent years renting tiny apartments, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. What was it like, being cut off from everyone? Lonely, especially during holidays. I'd see families together and remember what I used to have. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. But it also taught me who I really was when I wasn't trying to please people who didn't deserve it. Any regrets about taking the house? Only that it took 17 years for justice to find its way home. The real surprise came from an unexpected source. My phone rang while I was reviewing real estate listings for a potential investment property. Amelia? It's Santiago. I almost hung up. What do you want? I wanted to apologize and to tell you something about Tessa and your mom that you should probably know. I'm listening. They're planning something, some kind of lawsuit. Tessa's been talking to other lawyers, trying to find someone who'll take the case. What kind of case? Something about emotional distress and family property rights. She thinks if she can prove you gave the house away just to hurt her, she can get a judge to reverse the transfer. That's not how property law works. I know that. You know that. But Tessa's convinced herself that if she just finds the right lawyer and tells the right sob story, she can still get what she wants. Why are you telling me this? Santiago was quiet for a moment. Because living with her for 6 months taught me what kind of person she really is, and what kind of person you are. You didn't deserve what we did to your house. No, I didn't. For what it's worth, I think what you did was brilliant. Giving it to Whitney instead of just keeping it yourself. That was the perfect ending. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being right. The lawsuit never materialized. Apparently, 3 different attorneys told Tessa the same thing Benjamin had told me. You can't sue someone for legally transferring their own property, even if your feelings get hurt in the process. I ran into Mom at the grocery store 2 weeks ago. She was in the produce section, examining apples with the same critical eye she'd once used to examine my life choices. Amelia. She didn't look up from the fruit. Mom. Are you happy now? Your sister moved to Portland. I barely hear from her. I'm sorry she's far away. Are you? Because it seems like this is exactly what you wanted. To punish us for trying to help Tessa get her life together. I wanted to protect what I'd built. The punishment was just a side effect. She finally looked at me. That woman doesn't deserve what you gave her. Whitney deserves a lot more than what she got, but the house is a start. She's not even real family. Neither are you, apparently. Real family doesn't steal from each other. Mom put down the apple she'd been holding and walked away without another word. I finished my shopping and drove home to my condo, where Beckett was waiting with takeout from our favorite Thai place. We ate dinner on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and orange. Any regrets? He asked, the same question Whitney had posed. I thought about the house I'd built with my own hands, now filled with someone else's laughter and books and dreams. I thought about the family I'd lost and the peace I'd gained. I thought about the difference between being right and being happy, and how sometimes they're the same thing. None, I said. They built their empire on assumptions and inheritance. I built mine on receipts. Karma just used me as the courier. My phone buzzed with a text from Whitney. Thank you for giving me back my life. I smiled and typed back, thank you for helping me reclaim mine. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. Some end with lessons learned and relationships healed. This one ends with justice served and boundaries respected. And honestly, that's exactly the ending it deserved.
They handed my younger sister the keys to a brand new BMW, wrapped with a shining red bow, and they handed me 2 lonely dollar bills in a plastic envelope. That was my Christmas morning. The cheers, the laughter, the pride in their eyes, all of it aimed at her. Not one glance at me. My name is Rosalind Pierce, and in that instant, every buried scar of 34 years ripped open at once. The birthdays they skipped, the graduations they missed, the excuses they made while pouring every ounce of love and money into her. It wasn't just unfair. It was erasure. I sat there, clutching that cheap envelope, realizing I was worth exactly $2 to the people who were supposed to protect me. And at 2:17 me, I made the choice that would change everything. The living room shimmered with gold lights strung from a 12-foot tree, every branch heavy with glass ornaments. Laughter rolled through the house as relatives filled their plates from the buffet table and settled into couches draped with holiday throws. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted ham. A picture-perfect Christmas in Plano, Texas. Then the moment arrived. My parents wheeled open the garage doors, and the crowd spilled outside, shivering in the brisk December air. A gleaming white BMW convertible sat in the driveway, crowned with an oversized red bow that gleamed beneath the floodlights. My sister Shay squealed, bouncing on her heels, as my father pressed the keys into her manicured hand. Applause broke out, cameras flashed, and my mother clasped her palms under her chin like she was watching a miracle. I stood near the back, clutching a thin envelope they had placed in my hand. Inside were 2 crisp dollar bills. Nothing more. Just like that. My value was measured in green paper, smaller than the tip they'd leave at brunch. 34 years of swallowing second place collapsed into that moment. The birthdays spent with grocery store sheet cakes while Shay rode ponies at her princess parties. The college fund that never materialized for me, but somehow paid for her summer in Europe. The empty seats at my graduation because her soccer game mattered more. The bitterness lodged in my throat until I could barely swallow. My chest felt tight, as if the room itself had decided there wasn't enough oxygen for me. My mother leaned close and whispered something about how Shay needs reliable transportation for her clients. You understand? My father chuckled, adding, You've always managed fine on your own. And then Shay, radiant in her new leather jacket, turned to me with a syrupy smile. Don't worry, sis. When your fusion finally dies, I'll give you a lift. The condescension cut sharper than the cold. Hours later, the laughter still echoed from downstairs while I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan circling shadows across the wall. At 2:17 Siri, I pulled my suitcase from the closet and packed only what I could carry. The bare essentials. The things that belonged solely to me. I crept downstairs, placed my house key silently on the counter beside the coffee maker, and stepped into the freezing night. By 2:21, my car merged onto the interstate. One hand gripped the wheel, the other scrolling through contacts on my phone until every number tied to that house was blocked. I didn't look back. That was the night I chose myself. Rain hammered the windshield as I pulled into the glow of Buc-ee's, that oversized shrine of Texas road trips. The neon sign bled through the storm, casting the parking lot in garish pinks and yellows. My Fusion coughed as I shut off the engine, and for a moment I just sat there, listening to the rain drum its steady warning against the roof. Inside, the smell of coffee and brisket sandwiches wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't earned. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off tile so polished it made me dizzy. At the far counter, a woman with silver-streaked hair poured steaming coffee into a paper cup before I could even ask. Her name tag read Midge. Her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd lived long enough to spot hurt from a mile away. She slid the cup across, her hand brushing mine. Rough night? She asked gently. I tried to shake my head, but something cracked open instead. The words fell out like broken glass. Midge didn't flinch. She rested her hand briefly on my wrist and said, with the calm certainty of someone who'd already survived her own storms, Kin is one thing. Family is what you build. The sentence hit harder than any sermon I'd ever endured. Family could be chosen, built, defined, not just endured. My phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating against the paper cup. I glanced down. A notification from Credit Karma. New insurance account opened in your name. My stomach turned to ice. I hadn't opened anything. Someone was using me, my name, my record, my identity. I stood frozen under the buzzing lights of Buc-ee's, clutching coffee I couldn't taste, staring at a message that confirmed what I'd always suspected. I was nothing more than a tool to them. But Midge's words hummed beneath the panic, a quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, I could choose differently. By dawn, I was crossing state lines, the wipers pushing back sheets of rain as the miles unspooled toward North Carolina. Asheville's mountains rose gray and solemn against the horizon, a place that felt both foreign and strangely safe. Naomi opened her door before I knocked, pulling me into the kind of hug that says you're home without needing to explain why. She listened as I spilled fragments of Christmas night, nodding with the patience of someone who had witnessed too many of my stories over the years. Transfer to Charlotte, she urged, pressing a mug of tea into my hands. Start over where they can't reach you. I nodded. For the first time, the idea of building a life beyond their shadow seemed possible. That evening, I dug out the small metal lockbox I'd carried from place to place. Buried inside were brittle papers that smelled faintly of dust. My heart stuttered as I unfolded a statement from an old savings account, my college fund. The balance was gone. Every cent drained the exact year Shay had posted sunlit photos from Rome and Paris. The memory struck sharp. 19 years old, standing at the kitchen counter as my father slid a form toward me. "Just sign here. It's for address verification." I hadn't questioned. Now the truth roared back. That signature had been the key they used to unlock everything that should have been mine. I pressed trembling fingers to the page, the ink a ghost of my own naivete. Naomi dragged me to a community makerspace the next day, insisting I needed distraction. My hands fumbled clumsily with the loom, tangling threads into a knotted mess. I muttered an apology, but the instructor only smiled. "Don't pull so hard. Let the tension find its balance." The words sank deeper than they should have. My life had been pulled tight, frayed by hands that weren't mine. Maybe it was time to start weaving it back together, uneven and imperfect, but mine. I left that night aching with betrayal, yet steadier somehow. The sting of stolen money and stolen identity burning less like defeat and more like fuel. The pain didn't paralyze me. It pointed me forward. Charlotte felt like a clean slate. The glassy lobby, the polite nods, the hum of productivity that made it easy to pretend the past had been left somewhere back on I-30. By the end of my first week, I knew my building access code by heart and the names of 3 co-workers' dogs. I was almost breathing easy when HR asked me to step into a small conference room with a box of tissues already centered on the table. "There's been a report," the manager began carefully. "Allegations that you're emotionally unstable. We need to confirm you're okay to continue in your role." The phrasing, the tilt of concern that felt like judgment. It was the same old script wearing a new badge. On my lunch break, my phone lit up with a Plano area code, a familiar church office number. The pastor's voice was warm and weighted. "Your mother's very ill with worry. Come home, child. Don't let her carry this sin." The words slid under my ribcage like a blade, dressed in prayer. I hung up in the parking garage and stared at the oil-slick shimmer on the concrete until the world steadied. That night, a thick envelope waited in my mailbox. Notice of insurance delinquency. Inside, past due amounts circled in red. And there, in bold, under co-owner, Laurel Collins. My name. My stomach dropped through the floor. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was a hand in my pocket and a signature I had never given. The chill that ran up my spine had nothing to do with winter. I wasn't simply being ignored. I was being used. I called for a video meeting. Shay answered from a bright apartment, the kind with white walls and staged plants. Her smile stretched thin. "Okay, don't freak out," she started, which guaranteed I would. "The BMW is a short-term lease. Your name helped the approval. It's just paperwork." "Just paperwork," I repeated, holding the delinquency notice to the camera, with my name and my credit. She hesitated, then exhaled. "Evan needed sales to hit his bonus. He knew people at the dealership. Mom said it would be fine. You're always stable. You always land on your feet." The words were practiced, the defense of someone who'd never had to consider the cost of landing. "So Dad and Mom knew," I said. Not a question. "They thought you wouldn't mind." Her voice softened, almost pleading. "You're the strong one. If your name helps me, what's the harm?" There it was. The old theology of my childhood, translated into finance. My solidity was a resource to be mined. Heat rose behind my eyes, but my voice came out level. "This isn't help. It's fraud. And you're not borrowing my strength. You're stealing my name." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Somewhere off camera, a timer dinged. The domestic normalcy of that sound made the betrayal ring louder. "I'm going to pull every document," I said. "Policy, signatures, dates. I'll clear my record, legally if I have to." "For me?" she asked, fragile. "For my name," I answered, and ended the call. Dallas smelled like smoke and spice the night of my grandmother's birthday. The rented hall buzzed with chatter, country music twanging from a live band tucked in the corner. Long tables sagged under trays of brisket, cornbread, and sweet tea in mason jars. I walked in wearing a tailored dress and heels, my head high, but every eye seemed to weigh me like I was a guest in my own bloodline. I'd booked a room at the Marriott instead of staying with the family, and that small act had traveled through the clan like scandal. Grandma's face lit up when she saw me, her arms warm and steady. My parents, though, barely masked their annoyance, their smiles stretched too tight. Over dinner, my mother leaned close, perfume cloying, her words slick as butter on cornbread. "She's thinking about the will," she whispered, nodding toward Grandma. "Whoever shows real loyalty will inherit the lake house." The bait was clear: play nice, surrender, and maybe they'd reward me with a key. Later, my cousin cornered me by the dessert table, lowering her voice. "I shouldn't say this, but your dad's deep in gambling debt. The whole family's pretending it's not happening." As if the night hadn't twisted enough, Shay appeared at my elbow, her makeup smudged, her voice trembling. "The BMW's past due. I can't keep up with the payments. I don't know what to do." Around me, laughter roared, forks clinked, children ran between tables. Inside, I felt like I was standing alone in an echo chamber of secrets, each revelation tightening around me like barbed wire. Family, inheritance, money, shame, it all pressed against my chest at once, leaving me breathless in the middle of the noise. The next morning, I sat in a cramped office at a legal aid clinic downtown, the scent of old carpet and printer toner filling the air. A young attorney slid a file across the desk, the pages clipped neatly together. "This is the policy you asked about," she said. I flipped it open, my pulse quickening. There it was, my name printed bold as daylight, and below, a signature. My signature, except I hadn't written it. It was a scan, lifted straight from a form I'd signed at 19 when my father had told me it was just for an address verification. My stomach turned. The attorney tapped the dates. This was opened 3 days before Christmas. That means when they staged the big Bow and Keys presentation, the paperwork was already in place. So the celebration had been theater, a performance built on forgery. I asked about motive, though I already knew. The lawyer shrugged. Her fiancé worked the dealership floor. He'd get a commission bonus for closing this kind of deal. And Mom? I didn't need the attorney to say it. She'd signed off, offering up my name like collateral. I gathered everything I could. The policy, screenshots of past withdrawals from my college fund, a photo of the bow-draped BMW, recordings of guilt-laced calls from the pastor. Each piece was a stitch in a pattern I finally saw clearly. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt, I was armed. I slid the stack into a brown leather folder, ran my hand across the worn cover, and whispered to myself, "This will be the evidence in their trial. Not a courtroom trial, but the reckoning waiting inside my family's walls." The music and chatter from the banquet hall bled faintly through the walls as I closed the door behind me. The room was small, lit by a single fluorescent bulb that hummed overhead. My parents stood stiff near the fireplace prop. Shay hovering by the window, arms crossed, eyes darting anywhere but at me. I set the brown leather folder on the table and unlatched it. One by one, I laid the evidence in front of them. First, the bank statements. Clear proof that my college fund had been drained the very year Shay boarded a plane to Europe. Next, the BMW policy with my name typed bold across the top and the forged signature beneath it. A signature I hadn't touched in more than a decade. Then the HR letter from Charlotte, a reminder of how their whispers had slithered into my career. Finally, the scribbled notes from the pastor's calls, every sanctimonious plea preserved in ink. The silence was suffocating. My father's face flushed crimson, his jaw grinding as if denial could make the papers vanish. My mother stammered half-formed excuses, her hands twisting the edge of her blouse. Shay stared at the floor, cheeks pale, refusing to meet my eyes. I inhaled slowly, steady. My voice cut through the tension, calm and sharp. Here are my terms. 1. You void every document with my name. 2. You pay off what you owe on the BMW. 3. You go to family therapy. 4. You stop using faith as a weapon to keep me in line. The words dropped like stones into still water, ripples spreading across their stunned faces. No yelling, no dramatics, just the truth, and the weight of proof they couldn't outrun. I gathered the folder, pressed it shut, and walked toward the door. Minutes later, back in the glow of the banquet hall, I lifted a glass of champagne. Grandma smiled up at me, eyes bright as ever. To dignity, I said clearly, my voice carrying over the music. The gift you've always taught me. The room clinked their glasses. Only 3 people knew those words meant more than a toast. Weeks after the birthday party, Asheville's mountain air felt sharper, cleaner, like the city itself was reminding me I'd finally stepped onto solid ground. My mornings were spent at the courthouse annex and the bank, paperwork stacked in my bag heavier than any suitcase I'd carried on Christmas night. The first move was simple but final. I froze my credit, locking every doorway my family had ever slipped through. Then, I drafted a formal complaint to the insurance company, attaching copies of the fraudulent policy with my forged signature. My attorney mailed a certified letter to the dealership, demanding cancellation. Within days, confirmation came back. The policy was void, the contract dead in the water. Shay would have to return the BMW or shoulder the payments herself. It didn't end there. My parents, cornered by proof and pressure, signed a written agreement to reimburse every fee already incurred under my name. The signatures looked shaky, not like power, but like surrender. When the check arrived, I didn't cash it. I redirected the entire sum to establish a scholarship fund at the local community college, named after my grandmother, the one person who had never tried to twist love into leverage. It was more than restitution. It was a declaration. I refused to be dragged back into their economy of debt and guilt. The money that had been weaponized against me now carried a different weight, an investment in someone else's future, untainted by favoritism or fraud. Justice wasn't just about erasing their signature from my life. It was about writing my own. Snow drifted lazily past the window panes of my cabin, frosting the view of the Blue Ridge Mountains in soft white. The wooden walls creaked with the warmth of a fire, and the air smelled of mulled cider and pine logs. Laughter carried from the dining table, where friends from the makerspace and colleagues from Charlotte passed dishes back and forth, filling the room with a comfort that felt earned rather than inherited. Above the mantel, a scarlet shape caught the firelight. It was the red bow I had unraveled and rewoven by hand over the course of months, its fibers no longer stiff and gaudy, but soft, textured, and mine. Once it had been a symbol of humiliation, a prize given to my sister as I clutched $2 bills. Now it was art, transformed by my own labor, proof that what once broke me could be remade. On the shelf beside it sat a simple oak frame. Inside lay those same $2, pressed flat, with a brass plate beneath that read, "Family is what you build." The guests admired it without needing the story. For me, it was more than a decoration. It was a creed. The family I'd been born into had shifted too, in small, imperfect ways. My father had strung together 90 sober days, attending AA meetings in a church basement instead of casinos. My mother now spent her afternoons at the food pantry, handing out groceries instead of guilt. And Shay, dialing in from a cramped apartment on her phone screen, exhaled and admitted, with a smile edged by exhaustion, "I'm working 2 jobs now. For the first time. I'm standing on my own." Her words carried no entitlement, only effort, and for once, I didn't feel the urge to rescue her. Compassion without rescue. That was the line I had learned to hold. When the night quieted and the dishes were stacked, I stepped outside. The mountains stretched dark against the star-flecked sky, silent and immovable. I pulled my shawl tighter and whispered to the cold air, "I've woven my life back together." Crame! And in that stillness, with the bow on the wall and the framed $2 watching over me, I felt the truth settle deep. Freedom wasn't given. It was made, thread by thread, boundary by boundary, until the life I lived was finally, unmistakably mine. 17 years ago, my father slammed the door in my face and told me I was no longer his daughter. That night, standing in the rain with a single duffel bag, I stopped being Amara Whitfield, the obedient child, and became the girl he erased. His words carved a wound so deep it never fully closed. If you want to fly, do it without me. I built a life from that exile. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I walked back into his world at my brother's wedding. The foghorns from Camden Harbor moaned through the morning mist, mixing with the sharp smell of coffee that filled my kitchen. Light seeped weakly through the window, heavy with that gray, damp chill New England always carries in the fall. I sat at the counter with an envelope in my hands, the words pressed across the front in looping cursive, "Whitfield family." My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside lay a wedding invitation, cream cardstock edged with gold, announcing that my younger brother, Matthew, was marrying Hannah in 2 weeks' time. And there it was, in careful print, the word that hit harder than the cold air seeping in through the window frame. Family. After 17 years of silence, after being thrown out and cut off, somehow I was still listed as family. A rush of heat spread through my chest, equal parts anger and ache. Was I really family? Or just a name they couldn't edit out without raising questions? I stared at the word until the letters blurred, then lifted my eyes to the framed photograph on the wall. It showed the rescue helicopter I'd flown a dozen times into storms and chaos. That machine had been more of a home to me than the house I'd been forced out of. The shrill buzz of my phone shattered the moment. One new message. No name attached. Just the blunt words flashing on the screen. "Don't come. Don't embarrass him." I froze, the pulse in my throat pounding against my skin. I didn't need to ask who him was. Only one man had the power to send those words slicing through me like glass. My father. I set the phone down slowly, the silence in the room so thick I could hear my own breathing. Then I let out a shaky laugh, bitter at first, but sharp with resolve. Tearing the message into digital nothing, I whispered to the empty room, "I'm going, not for him. For Matthew, and for what Hannah already knows." On the counter beside the invitation, I placed a small object I always kept hidden at the back of a drawer. A strip of medical gauze, stained and stiff with old salt water. The fabric had saved someone's life once, and its story was mine alone, for now. Its presence was a quiet promise that the past wasn't finished with me yet. The night comes back to me in fragments. The heavy reek of my father's cigarettes, the grit of concrete dust still clinging to his shirt from the job site, the slam of papers on the kitchen table. He didn't even bother sitting down. A manila folder skidded across the wood toward me, its corners bent. My name typed neatly at the top of every form inside. Law, accounting, business, every path but the one I had already chosen. I stood clutching a letter that felt heavier than stone, the acceptance into the air medical training program I'd been dreaming of for years. My hands shook as I held it out, like a child offering proof she was worth keeping. He didn't glance at it. His eyes stayed cold, locked on mine. "This house isn't raising a sky taxi driver," he said flatly, voice laced with disdain. I swallowed hard, heart pounding in my ears. "I'm choosing the sky," I whispered. It was the first time in my life I'd ever contradicted him. The silence that followed was colder than the rain tapping against the kitchen windows. Then he walked to the front door, pulled it open, and without raising his voice said, "You want to fly? Fine. Start by surviving without me. Get out!" My mother burst into tears, rushing to him, clutching his arm, begging through broken sobs. Her voice was drowned by the thunder outside and his stony refusal to soften. On the staircase, Matthew hovered, pale and stricken, his eyes darting between us, loyalty to our father weighing heavier than the apology he couldn't say aloud. I remember the sound of my own breath, shallow, as if the walls of the house themselves had pushed me out. I lifted the strap of my duffel bag, heavy with nothing more than a few clothes, a pair of worn sneakers, and the folded acceptance letter pressed deep in the side pocket. The rain hit like needles when I stepped outside. My jacket clung to my skin, soaked through within seconds. Behind me, the door slammed shut, the echo sealing the fracture that would split 17 years wide. The air smelled of wet cement and smoke, and I knew even then it would haunt me forever. I tightened my grip on the bag, set my jaw, and walked into the storm. Every step in the dark, I repeated one vow in my head. From now on, every mile I run will be my answer. Back in the present, I sat at my small kitchen table with my flight log open, pages filled with scrawled notes from missions that blurred together. One entry caught my eye, dated October 2012. My handwriting leaned urgent, cramped by adrenaline. Cliff rescue, female, 16 to 17, hypothermia risk. The memory snapped back sharp as salt spray. A storm off the coast, winds battering the rotor blades, ropes whipping as I rappelled down the slick face of a cliff. The girl clung desperately to the rocks, her knuckles bloodless, eyes wide with terror. I could feel the vibration of her shivering through the rope as I hooked onto her harness. I pressed my forehead against hers, locking her gaze in the howl of the wind. "Breathe with me. Just look at me. Don't let go." My voice was calm, though my own arms burned from the strain. Inch by inch, we rose together, the sea clawing at our heels, until finally the winch lifted us clear. By the time we reached the chopper, my hands were raw, the strip of gauze I'd wrapped around her arm soaked stiff with seawater. I still keep that strip, faded and brittle, tucked away like a secret only I understand. Later, I'd received a message, just a short note from someone signing only as H. Words of gratitude for saving her life. For years, I never knew who she was. I carried the mystery like an unanswered question. It wasn't until a few weeks before Matthew's wedding that the truth landed like another storm. Hannah, his bride, was the girl from that cliff. She looked me in the eye, her voice steady but full of weight. "You saved me once, and I've never forgotten. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell them. Everyone needs to know who you are." The rehearsal dinner smelled of garlic butter and scallops, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes long after you'd left. Country music played low under the hum of conversation, glasses clinking, silverware chiming against plates. I smoothed the skirt of the simple dress I'd chosen, neat but unassuming, and took my seat halfway down the table. At the head, my father leaned back with the air of a man who owned not just the room, but the entire town. He swirled his glass of wine, eyes narrowing at me, before his mouth twisted into a half-smile. "Flying in circles all day," he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What good does that really do for anyone?" The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Every gaze turned toward me, waiting for a reaction. Then, a woman near the end of the table set her napkin down and spoke, her voice carrying with a steady conviction. "You're Amara Whitfield, aren't you? The life flight pilot? You flew my husband in last year when his heart stopped. He's alive today because of you." A murmur rippled through the guests. For a fleeting second, warmth filled the silence, recognition, gratitude. But my father cut it short with a sharp shake of his head. "Don't exaggerate," he snapped. "It's a reckless stunt job, nothing more. Don't paint it as something noble." Another voice joined in, rough but respectful. One of his old firehouse friends leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "Robert, it's dangerous work, and it matters. You know it does." Color rose up my father's neck. He barked back. Not in this family, it doesn't. We don't call that a profession. Beneath the table, Hannah's hand found mine. A small squeeze, quick but firm, her whisper hidden under the scrape of chairs. Tomorrow, she said. I'll tell them. I lifted my glass of wine, let the tartness settle on my tongue, and smiled. Not in defiance, but in calm. No retort, no scene. Just the quiet strength of someone who had weathered storms harsher than this. Across the table, my father's stare burned into me, trying to crush me as he always had. But this time, I didn't flinch. I'd already learned how to stand steady in the eye of a hurricane. Later that night, the wind screamed down the coast, rattling the thin window panes of the small inn where I was staying. I sat alone at the desk, the ocean's roar crashing in time with the pulse in my ears. In front of me lay a wooden box I hadn't opened in years. Its hinges creaked as if even they carried the weight of memory. Inside, folded carefully, was a letter from my mother. The paper had yellowed, her handwriting delicate but unwavering. Hope is the thing with feathers. She'd left it for me in her final days. A whisper of faith pressed into ink when her voice could no longer carry the words. Beneath it, another envelope, never sealed. The letter I had once written to my father, inviting him to watch me receive a medal for distinguished service. My words blurred where tears had fallen years ago. I had never sent it. He had never known. I reached for my phone, almost on instinct, and scrolled back to the message that had clawed at me earlier. Don't come. Don't embarrass him. Tonight I traced it to its source, and the truth landed like a punch to the ribs. The number belonged to one of his spare phones. It had been him all along. My hands shook, but not from fear. Anger steadied me. He hadn't just denied me. He wanted to erase me completely, to keep me invisible even here, at my own brother's wedding. I captured the screen, the damning evidence, and stored it away. Then I deleted the thread, not as surrender, but as choice. Tomorrow would speak louder than any reply I could send. One by one, I returned the letters to the box. On top, I laid the strip of salt-stained gauze, brittle now with age. 3 relics, stacked like layers of my life. My mother's hope, my father's absence, and the life I had fought to save when no one believed in me. I closed the lid gently, the storm outside clawing at the walls, and whispered into the dark. Tomorrow, the truth will stand on its own. The old boathouse had been transformed with strings of golden lights and white blooms tucked into every corner. But the smell of salt water still clung to the beams. Waves slapped against the pilings below, the wind outside rising with the kind of restless energy that warned of a storm moving in. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and for a moment the celebration carried on as if nothing dark hovered on the horizon. Then my father rose, wineglass in hand, his voice cutting through the music like a blade. Some people think flying in circles all day counts as serving the community, he said, letting the pause stretch. To me, it's nothing but showing off. The room stilled. Eyes flicked toward me, curious, unsettled. From across the tables, a woman stood, her voice trembling but fierce. That's not true. She flew my husband to the hospital when his heart gave out. If not for her, he wouldn't be alive tonight. Murmurs spread, heads nodding, the tide of opinion shifting. My father's jaw tightened. Coincidence, he snapped. Don't make her into something she's not. His tone faltered, though the first crack in his certainty. Just then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid it open under the table. An emergency alert from the weather center. High winds, widespread outages expected. A storm was coming. I silenced it and slipped the phone away, steadying my breath. At the center of the dance floor, Hannah stepped forward, a microphone trembling in her hands. Her eyes swept the room before landing on me. Before we dance, she said softly, I need to tell you something. The chatter died instantly. The entire hall fell into silence. The band stopped mid-note. Only the wind outside and the restless surf filled the pause. Hannah, radiant in lace, drew a breath deep enough to steady her shaking shoulders, then looked straight at me. 10 years ago, she began, her voice clear though her hands clutched the mic. I was stranded on a cliff in a storm. I thought I was going to die. Then a young woman lowered herself down on a rope, pressed her forehead to mine, and told me, "Breathe with me. Look at me. That woman is my sister-in-law tonight." Gasps rippled through the room. The stillness held like a held breath. Hannah's voice grew stronger. Because of her, I lived. Because of her, I learned what courage looks like. That's why we started the Coast and Sky Fund, 23 training programs for rescue teams across Maine, all built on her call sign. The back doors opened, and suddenly, uniformed rescuers stood tall among the guests. One by one, they bowed their heads toward me. Matthew stepped forward, his voice carrying over the roar of applause beginning to rise. I asked Hannah to trace the records until she found you. You've always been my sister. This is your family, too, if you want it. Chairs scraped back as people rose to their feet. Thunderous clapping rolled like the ocean outside. Through the blur of faces and the shimmer of light, I saw only my father, rigid in his chair, knuckles white against the table's edge. I stood slowly, lifted my glass, and inclined my head. A simple nod. The ovation crashed around me like waves, but he stayed seated, alone in the eye of it. The night pressed in heavy, the wind howling off the bay, rattling the old boathouse walls. Strings of golden lights swung wildly overhead, the crash of waves pounding against the pilings like drums. Laughter still rang through the crowd when, suddenly, the room went black. A pop, then silence, broken only by startled gasps. Panic spread fast. Children cried. Voices rose. The storm outside shrieked through the cracks. Phone screens flicked on, scattering shards of light across anxious faces. Then, a scream cut through it all, sharp and terrified. A man had collapsed by the head table, his body crumpling against the floor. I rushed forward, heart hammering. In the pale glow, I saw who it was, my father's oldest friend. I dropped to my knees, fingers at his neck. His pulse was faint, then gone. "Clear the space!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the chaos. "I need light here!" My father loomed over me, frozen, blocking the beam of a phone. For a split second, we locked eyes, his wide with shock. "You're in my way," I barked. "Step back!" And for the first time in 17 years, he obeyed. Training surged through me, hands interlocked. I drove compressions into his chest. "You, get the AED. You, mouth to mouth with me, now!" A nurse in the crowd dropped beside me, following my lead. The air was thick with salt and sweat, the acrid smell of fear. Each push rattled my arms, each breath a gamble against the dark. The man's chest rose under the strobe of cell phone beams, the rhythm of my compressions matching the relentless pound of the sea. Minutes stretched, brutal and endless, until flashing red lights broke through the storm outside. Paramedics burst in, sliding a stretcher across the wet floor. Even as they loaded him, I stayed pressing down, blood and sweat streaking my sleeves. Then, suddenly, his body jerked, a cough, a gasp. Life clawed its way back. The hall was silent, breath held in unison, until a single clap started, then another. Applause swelled slowly, rolling like thunder, like waves breaking against the shore. And I sat back on my heels, chest heaving, the taste of salt sharp on my tongue. The storm had loosened its grip, leaving only the hiss of rain sliding down the boathouse roof and the creak of timber still straining against the wind. I sat on a bench in the corridor, lungs aching from effort, my sleeves damp with sweat and blood. My pulse was still racing when I saw his shadow stretch long across the wet planks, the unmistakable shape of my father. He stopped a few feet away, his frame smaller now, his shoulders stooped in a way I had never noticed before. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen still glowing, and held it up for him to see. The screenshot glared back, the message that had tried to bar me from this wedding. "Don't come. Don't embarrass him." "You didn't just deny me," I said, my voice low but steady. You tried to erase me. Because you're afraid I'd make you look small. His fists curled tight, the veins standing out like old rope. For a moment, I thought he'd explode, but instead, his eyes flickered, wet and trembling. When he finally spoke, the words cracked apart. I don't know how to stand up anymore. Behind us, footsteps. Matthew appeared, his face pale, caught between us. This isn't about who was right 17 years ago, he said firmly. It's about who we decide to be tomorrow morning. Hannah emerged from the doorway, pressing a microphone into my hand. Say something, she whispered. The students are here. They're listening. I turned back toward the hall, toward rows of young faces still wide-eyed from the storm. I drew a breath and let the words come. If someone throws you out the door, I said slowly, remember, doors aren't just for leaving. They're also for coming back, once you've built your own wings. A ripple of applause broke, high-pitched claps from the children first. Then deeper, heavier hands joining in. A few adults wiped their eyes. I looked back at my father. He said nothing, but for the first time, his eyes lowered, not in contempt, but in surrender. The sky was a pale wash of silver when the rotors began to turn, scattering gulls into the air with their shrill cries. I lifted the life flight helicopter smoothly off the pad, the bay still draped in morning fog that peeled back in slow ribbons as the sun crept higher. Beneath me, Rockport shrank to a scatter of rooftops, the docks stretching out like the bones of an old hand. The pier where my father had so often stood, commanding the harbor like it belonged to him, was now just a speck dissolving into the horizon. The vibration of the controls steadied me, a rhythm I'd trusted for years. Then my phone, strapped to the dash, lit up with a message. I glanced at the screen, my pulse catching despite myself. From his main number, the first time in nearly 2 decades. If you want, meet me at the pier. No past. Just learning how to stand beside each other. I let the words hang there, the glow of the text bright against the morning haze. For a long moment, I didn't move, didn't type, didn't answer. Then I pressed the button, the screen going dark. Sunlight struck the windshield, painting my reflection back at me. My face was calm now. The tightness around my eyes eased. Hold your altitude, I murmured to myself, voice lost in the thrum of the blades. The helicopter skimmed low over the bay, casting a long shadow across the rippling water. My silhouette and the aircraft's merged into one dark shape sliding over the waves, framed in light. It was more than flight, it was proof. Proof that I had built something solid, that I could stand alone, and that even the door once slammed in my face could remain open, waiting, if I ever chose to step back through. The music in the ballroom was soft, the kind of polished background noise meant to keep 100 conversations humming. I moved slowly along the aisle of tables, heels clicking against marble, scanning the neat row of name cards until I saw mine. Verona Kingsley. For a moment, I felt relief. My place was here, written in the same elegant script as everyone else's. It was a small comfort, a reminder that, at least on paper, I still belonged. I reached for the chair, intent on claiming the only square of space left for me in a night already designed to erase me. My fingers touched the backrest, and just as I began to lower myself, the chair slid violently out from under me. The floor came up fast, cold and merciless. Gasps erupted, followed by a few muffled laughs. My palms stung against the polished surface as I pushed myself up, dazed but not broken. When I looked up, I saw her, my sister, Sienna, standing with the chair still in her hands, her smile sweet and sharp enough to cut. "The floor suits you better, sis," she whispered, though the venom in her voice carried farther than she intended. 200 guests sat frozen, some turning their faces away, others watching with the kind of uneasy curiosity reserved for car wrecks and scandals. My parents stayed at the head table, motionless, their silence louder than any defense. No one reached for me. No one stood. I rose slowly, brushed off my dress, and adjusted my shoulders. My heart was hammering, but my face stayed calm. I gave her nothing, not tears, not fury, only silence. But inside, a vow burned. Tonight would not end with me on the ground. This was only the beginning. Growing up in the Kingsley house was like standing in two different climates at once. For Sienna, the air was always warm, filled with sunshine, praise, and indulgence. For me, it was colder, quieter, a space where hard work went unnoticed, and sacrifice was treated like background noise. I still remember the Thanksgiving when our father almost lost the house. The foreclosure letters were stacked in the kitchen drawer, hidden under grocery coupons. As if paper could bury panic, I signed a check that covered everything, slipped it under his coffee mug before the family arrived. Later that night, while he carved the turkey, my mother turned the conversation toward Sienna's new boyfriend, a musician with more charm than income. "He has such potential," she said, beaming, as if my silent rescue had been nothing but wallpaper in the room. That was always the rhythm. I kept the books balanced, tuition paid, bills managed, and still my name never left their lips except with a sigh. "Verona is doing fine," they'd say, their voices tinged with pity instead of pride. "Fine, but still single. Fine, but too serious. Fine, but never enough." Sienna, 10 years younger, didn't need to try. She had the kind of smile that made teachers forgive late homework and relatives forget her. Mistakes! By the time she reached high school, my sacrifices had paved her road so smooth she never stumbled. She glided into adulthood with brand deals, photo shoots, and a curated online life that earned applause at every family gathering. "She's a star," my mother would say, her eyes shining. I'd sip water quietly in the corner, invisible in my own story. But the truth was more complicated than applause and envy. Sienna hated being measured against me. Teachers once said, "Your sister excels at math. Why can't you?" Relatives joked, "Verona is the steady one. Sienna is the fun one." What they thought was harmless cut her deeper than they realized. And in her eyes, every time my parents dismissed me for being unmarried, she gained ground. My independence was proof of her superiority. When the wedding invitations went out, Sienna's message to me was laced with honey and warning. "You'll come, of course," she said. "But don't make it one of your boardrooms. No intimidating dresses, okay?" Her laugh was light, but her eyes were sharp. She wanted me there, but muted, ornamental at best, erased at worst. I nodded and said nothing. That had always been my way. Silence as armor, silence as survival. But inside, I felt the tension coil. This wedding wasn't just her celebration. It was the stage she had been building for years, and I knew she intended to use me as part of the backdrop. The closer her day came, the clearer it became. Sienna wasn't just preparing to be a bride. She was preparing to humiliate me, and for the first time, I wondered just how far she would go. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like living in a house built entirely for Sienna. Every conversation, every errand, every ounce of energy from my parents revolved around her. She was whisked from one bridal appointment to another, their voices always rising with excitement when they talked about lace flown in from Paris or flowers imported from Tuscany. I stopped by my parents' home one afternoon, hoping maybe to feel useful. The dining table was covered in fabric swatches and glossy magazines. My mother leaned over Sienna with an expression I rarely saw directed at me. Pure pride, tender and unguarded. "This ivory shade will make you glow, darling," she said. "Nathan won't even be able to breathe when you walk down the aisle." When she noticed me standing in the doorway, her face changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by something sharper. "Verona," she said, "don't you have work? You're always so busy. Sometimes I wish you'd stop being so practical." The word landed with the weight of a judgment. Practical, not romantic. Useful, not lovable. Sienna caught my eye in the mirror as she adjusted the bodice of her gown. Her lips curled in that smile she had perfected. Sweet enough for an audience, but edged like glass. "Of course you'll come," she said. "But don't overdo it. No need to show up looking like you're about to close $1 billion deal. This is my wedding, not your boardroom." She laughed, as if it were a joke. I forced a smile, but inside, my chest tightened. When the seating chart was unveiled at the rehearsal dinner, I traced the names with a flicker of hope. Maybe this time, I'd be allowed a place near the center. Instead, my name was tucked into a far corner at table 24, next to distant relatives who wouldn't remember me by morning. It wasn't just a seat, it was a message. Stay out of sight. The photographs followed the same pattern. Parents of the bride, the happy couple, siblings. When I stepped forward, the photographer glanced at his list and shook his head. I don't see you here, ma'am. Maybe in the extended family shot? Extended family? I stepped back, my hands folded in front of me, while my parents smiled for the camera, as though I didn't exist. Sienna glided past me, radiant in her rehearsal gown, whispering through her painted smile. Most of the guests don't even know who you are. It's less awkward this way. You don't want people whispering, "Do you?" I swallowed the words rising in my throat and said nothing. Silence again. Always silence. But that night, alone in my hotel room, I opened the glossy program left on the desk. Pages of sponsors, bridal party, family acknowledgments, and my name nowhere to be found. For the first time, I admitted what I had long suspected. In Sienna's world, I wasn't a sister. I was an inconvenience. Tomorrow she intended to make that clear, no matter who was watching, and I wasn't sure how much longer my silence could hold. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, Sienna cornered me in her bedroom while she tried on one of her many gowns. She stood before the mirror, her hair falling in perfect waves. Her lips painted a soft blush. For a moment, she looked every bit the glowing bride she wanted the world to see. Then her eyes flicked to mine in the reflection, and the sweetness slipped. "You'll come tomorrow, of course," she said lightly, fluffing the skirt so it shimmered under the light. "But just to show your face. Don't make this about you. Don't intimidate anyone. This isn't your arena." Her tone was honeyed, but every word was a blade. I felt the twist of it deep inside. She didn't just want me small, she wanted me invisible. I stood in the doorway, fingers clenched around the strap of my purse. 100 responses burned in my throat, but I gave her nothing. Only a slight nod. Her smile widened, as if she had won some private battle. That evening, when guests gathered for the rehearsal dinner, I tried again to slip into the flow of family chatter, but the seating card reminded me of my place. Far corner, out of sight. When I finally sat down, the laughter from the head table reached me like echoes from another world. I glanced at my sister, radiant beneath the chandeliers, and for the first time I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. She wasn't preparing, simply to celebrate. She was preparing to humiliate. Every detail of this wedding, every gesture, every exclusion, it wasn't careless. It was intentional. She needed me diminished, because my presence, my success, my silence, all of it unsettled her. And as I sat there, pushing food around my plate, I felt the warning behind her smile settle in my chest. Tomorrow, she would not stop at subtle jabs or whispered jokes. Tomorrow, she would strike in front of everyone. I didn't know how, not yet, but I could feel it coming like thunder in the distance. And when it broke, the storm wouldn't just belong to her. The reception hall glittered, as if nothing cruel could ever happen beneath its chandeliers. White linen, crystal glassware, and a string quartet humming in the corner painted the picture of elegance. Guests in satin dresses and tailored suits filled the room with polite laughter, the kind of laughter that never expected a storm. I walked slowly along the rows of tables, heels steady, searching for my card. There it was. Verona Kingsley, tucked neatly in front of a single chair at the edge of the hall. My one small square of belonging. I reached for it, grateful at least for a name written in ink. Then, just as I began to lower myself, the chair jerked away. The ground slammed against me, cold marble biting through fabric and bone. For one heartbeat, silence blanketed the hall. Then came the gasps, the nervous chuckles, the quick shift of eyes trying to decide whether to pity me or laugh. Above me, Sienna stood with the chair still in her grip, her smile radiant for the audience, but edged with malice only I could fully read. She leaned just close enough for her words to sting. "The floor suits you better. Sis?" I pressed my palm to the marble and forced myself upright. My knees ached, but I rose slowly, deliberately, adjusting my dress as though nothing had happened. I gave her no tears, no fury, no scene to spin into entertainment, only silence. Around us, the crowd shifted, uncomfortable. My parents sat unmoving at the head table, their expressions carefully blank, their silence louder than applause. No hand reached for me, no voice cut through the cruelty. I straightened my shoulders, brushed off invisible dust, and walked toward the doors. Each step echoed like a gavel in the hall. My sister wanted me shattered. Instead, I left her with frustration curling at the corners of her smile. But as the music and chatter resumed behind me, I knew something had cracked open that could never be closed again. This wasn't just another slight to endure. This was the line I could not let her cross without consequence. I lingered in the corridor, my breath uneven, the hum of the quartet muffled by the heavy doors. My palms still stung from the fall, but what cut deeper was the silence of everyone I had once called family. I thought if I stayed away long enough, the humiliation might fade into shadows. I was wrong. By the time I returned to my table, a cluster of younger guests were already hunched over their phones, giggling behind their hands, eyes darting toward me. My stomach tightened. I slipped my phone from my clutch and opened the app I dreaded. There it was, a 30-second clip of me hitting the marble floor, the caption blazing, "Savage bride prank, 200 guests gasped." The sound of my body striking the ground echoed from the tiny speaker, followed by the cruel smirk on Sienna's face. It had already been viewed thousands of times. For a moment, panic clamped around my chest. My career had been built on control, precision, never faltering under scrutiny. Now my dignity was a hashtag. My first instinct was to call the guest who had posted it, to demand it be removed. But then I read the comments. That poor woman stood up like a queen. The bride is heartless. Who does this to her own sister? She didn't even flinch. That's real strength. The words blurred. Not from shame, but from something unexpected. Recognition. For once, I didn't have to defend myself, explain, or prove. Strangers saw the cruelty for what it was. They saw my silence not as weakness, but as power. I closed my eyes, letting the glow of the screen wash across my hands. Sienna had meant to reduce me, to turn me into a spectacle. Instead, the world was seeing her cruelty and my refusal to break. When I slipped my phone back into my clutch, the fear in my stomach had loosened. Let them share it. Let them watch it 100 times. Each replay revealed her malice and my resolve. The humiliation that was meant to erase me had become the evidence that I would no longer be invisible. And this time, I wasn't the only one who had noticed. The room was buzzing with laughter and champagne, but I could feel the shift even before it happened. Nathan had stopped playing the part of the groom. His smile was gone, his hand tightening around the microphone as if he were steadying himself against a storm. Only he could see. His eyes found me across the hall, then dropped to the phoenix pendant at my throat, and in that instant, the truth landed between us. He knew. He rose slowly, and the crowd hushed. Guests expected another toast about love and blessings, some charming anecdote meant to flatter the bride. But his voice was different now, low, sharp, deliberate. "Miss Kingsley," he said, his gaze locked on me. "You're the one who saved my company with $25 million. Aren't you?" A ripple of shock cut through the hall. The quartet faltered. Glasses froze halfway to mouths. Every head turned in unison toward my corner. My parents stiffened, their smiles collapsing into confusion. Sienna's hand clenched around her wineglass so hard, I thought it might shatter. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence answer for me. Nathan pressed on. His voice grew stronger, fueled by something rawer than gratitude. "What none of you know is that 2 years ago, my company was weeks from bankruptcy. Investors fled, competitors circled, and then an anonymous fund stepped in. Not once, but 3 times. Without it, we wouldn't be here tonight. I wouldn't be here." His hand trembled as he pointed toward me. "It was her, Verona Kingsley." The room gasped again. But this time it wasn't laughter. It was disbelief, admiration, shame. People shifted in their seats, suddenly remembering the woman they had watched hit the marble floor. Sienna tried to laugh, her voice pitched too high. That's ridiculous. Verona has nothing to do with... But Nathan cut her off. You never told me, Sienna. You knew. You let me believe you were the one with resources, with stability. But it was her. And worse, you betrayed me. A murmur swept like wildfire. Nathan's jaw clenched as he turned back to the guest. She sent confidential files to my competitor. Verona was the one who contained the damage quietly, never asking for recognition. Sienna's face drained of color. My parents leaned forward, whispering frantically, but their voices drowned in the rising noise of the crowd. And then, from the head table, Nathan's mother stood, her voice carried with a weight that silenced the room. Our family will not be tied to deceit. This wedding is over. The chandeliers glittered above, but all eyes were on me now, not as the sister humiliated, but as the woman who had stood and endured, the one who had held dignity when everyone else let it slip away. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply lifted my chin, steady as stone, and in the silence that followed, I finally felt seen. The room was still heavy with Nathan's mother's words when I rose from my chair. Every eye followed me as I walked toward the head table. My heels struck the marble floor with a steady rhythm, each step louder than the murmurs that had filled the hall only moments before. Sienna sat frozen, her face pale beneath layers of makeup, her hands trembling against the folds of her gown. For once, there was no smirk, no clever whisper, only silence. I stopped before her, my fingers brushing the chain at my neck. Then, I slipped my hand into my clutch and pulled out the Kingsley family ring, a simple gold band, passed through generations, entrusted to me in the end, though Sienna had always assumed it would be hers. I placed it gently on the white linen tablecloth between us. The metal caught the chandelier light, gleaming brighter than any jewel. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. Honor can't be borrowed. It can't be bought through marriage or stolen through deceit. It's carried in your actions. Tonight, you showed the world you never had it. A murmur rippled through the guests, solemn, almost reverent. Sienna's lips parted, but no sound came. She couldn't reach for the ring. She couldn't even look at me. I straightened my shoulders, turned, and walked away. No applause, no triumph, only the silence of a room that finally saw me clearly. Some guests rose instinctively, not to stop me, but in acknowledgement. At the doors, I paused just long enough to let the weight of the moment settle. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their praise. I carried something stronger than both. My dignity, intact, unshaken. And that was enough. I'm Dahlia Mercer, and on my wedding day, I learned love isn't the only thing that makes your hands shake. The band was easing into a Motown classic, guests drifting across the patio when my mother glided toward me with a glass of red wine. Her smile was flawless, practiced, tender. I lifted the bowl to my nose and paused. Beneath the cherry and oak, there was a medicinal thread, like cough syrup left too long in a cabinet. It was nothing you could point to, and everything I couldn't ignore. New bottle? I asked, keeping my voice light. Special, Margaret said, pressing the stem into my hand. For you! A laugh burst over my shoulder. Emily, cheeks flushed from dancing, looped her arm through mine. You'll never finish that, she teased. Here, let me toast you first. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was the knot that had been there since morning. Maybe I was just tired of doing what I was told. I tipped the glass toward her with a smile like a dare. To sisters, I said. She sipped. Music swelled. Noah spun me once under the string lights, and I let the moment carry me. I set my untouched champagne down and kept glancing at the wine I hadn't reclaimed. 30 minutes later, someone screamed Emily's name. Chairs scraped. The song cut mid-lyric. I turned to see her sway, eyes unfocused, hand clawing for a chair before her legs gave way. The floor caught her with a sound I still hear at night. My mother was first through the circle. Napkin fluttering, voice soothing, too soothing. As she pressed my shoulder, she quietly whispered, You did beautifully. That was when the warmth peeled back, and truth showed its face. The drink had never been meant for her. The vineyard looked like a photograph. Rows of vines catching the late spring light. The sky rinsed in gold. From a distance, you'd think it was perfect, that I was perfect, that this was the start of something safe and certain. But even as the music swirled and the chatter rose around me, a weight sat in my chest that I couldn't shake. I told myself it was nerves. Everyone says brides get jittery. Still, when I caught sight of my mother across the courtyard, that perfect pastel dress hugging her frame, pearls resting neatly against her collarbone, the unease sharpened. Margaret Mercer didn't do anything without a reason. Not her clothes, not her words, not the way her smile curved when she handed me that glass. Special, she'd said. For you. I'd played my part, smiling, sipping champagne, laughing when expected, right up until Emily collapsed. The moment it happened, the night split in two. 1 second, the world was music and soft lights. The next, people were shouting, a chair tipped over, and my sister was on the ground, her face pale, lips parted in a terrible kind of confusion. Noah was there in an instant, his hands steady, voice calm as he called for help. Someone yelled for an ambulance. And then there was my mother, perfectly composed, crouched beside Emily with a damp napkin, murmuring about dehydration and low blood sugar, like she'd been rehearsing the lines. I didn't move. Couldn't. Because all I could see, all I could smell, was that glass. That smell, and the soft press of her hand on my shoulder, her voice low, praising me like I'd done something good, something planned. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was shaking, but not from fear. It was something colder, something sharp that cut right through the noise. Emily was breathing. They said it was a fainting spell. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress. She'd be okay. Everyone believed it. Everyone except me. Later, when the courtyard emptied and the table stood bare under the moonlight, I stood alone where she had fallen. The grass was damp, the air heavy with the sweet scent of roses and spilled champagne, but none of it felt the same. My dress clung to me, my feet ached, and my heart was pounding out a rhythm I couldn't quiet. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that it had been nothing more than a coincidence, a bad glass of wine, or too little food, or too much heat. But deep down, where instinct lives, I knew better. I left the vineyard with my arm looped through Noah's, my body moving, my mouth forming polite thank yous, but my mind already somewhere else, locked on that glass, that smell, and that smile that had never, not once in my life, meant love. And for the first time, I let myself wonder if my mother wanted me gone. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. I sat in the corner of Emily's room, my dress wrinkled and my hair pinned half down, while Noah spoke quietly with the doctor in the hall. Machines beeped steadily beside her bed, each one a reminder that she was alive, that whatever had almost taken her hadn't finished the job. My mother stood at the foot of the bed, her hands folded in front of her like a saint in mourning. She thanked the nurses, asked questions in that polite, even tone that charmed strangers, and patted Emily's hand like she hadn't been on the floor less than an hour earlier. "She just needs rest," Margaret said when I didn't answer her. "The doctor thinks it was stress, maybe dehydration. You know how she overextends herself." I stared at her, but she didn't flinch. She never did. Her smile stayed soft, her pearls glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. And just like that, doubt started its cruel work. What if I was wrong? What if it really had been nothing more than a fainting spell? People collapse all the time at weddings. It's a lot. Heat, excitement, champagne on an empty stomach. But then I'd close my eyes. And there it was again, that bitter chemical edge. That moment of hesitation before I handed her the glass. And my mother's voice, steady and quiet against the chaos, telling me I'd done beautifully. When Emily stirred, her lashes fluttering against pale cheeks, I moved to her side. She blinked up at me, confusion clouding her face. "What happened?" she whispered. "You fainted," I said, smoothing the blanket over her arm. "You scared the hell out of everyone." "Mom said dehydration," she murmured, her voice thick with exhaustion. "Yeah," I said, forcing my lips into something that felt like a smile. That's what she said. But when I turned, I caught my mother's eyes on me, sharp, unreadable, and in that moment, the doubt burned away. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Noah was still asleep, his arm draped across my waist, his breathing steady. I slid out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, and sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that went cold long before I touched it. My phone buzzed with messages, friends sending love, relatives asking for updates. But it was the silence from my mother that rattled me most. No check-ins, no faux concerned texts, just silence. When I finally answered Helen's message, her reply came fast. "I can't stop thinking about last night. Are you okay?" I stared at the blinking cursor before typing back. "No." "Something's wrong." "I don't know what, but something's wrong." Her response was immediate. "Then let's find out what." The words steadied me more than I expected. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Whatever had been in that glass wasn't an accident. And if I wanted to make sure Emily never lay in a hospital bed again because of me, I had to stop pretending my mother's love wasn't laced with poison. By the third morning after the wedding, the world outside had slipped back into ordinary life. Cars hummed down the street, sprinklers ticked across lawns, and neighbors waved on their way to work. But inside me, nothing felt ordinary. I couldn't keep moving like nothing had happened. So I drove back to the vineyard. I told the event manager, a young man named Reed, that I'd misplaced a bracelet, an heirloom from my grandmother. His face softened, and he led me into the back rooms without hesitation. The bridal suite looked empty now, stripped of flowers and laughter. I pretended to search, running my fingers over the vanity, glancing under cushions. Then I asked, almost too casually, if any bottles of wine had been left behind. Reed hesitated. "We inventory everything," he said finally. "Most went back into storage. But there was one odd bottle flagged during cleanup. Not on the list." He pulled it from a shelf, the label darker, unfamiliar. The cork was untouched, but the liquid seemed thicker, heavier. My skin prickled as I stared at it. I asked if I could take it. Reed frowned, then relented when I mentioned my sister's collapse. I drove straight to Helen's apartment. She didn't ask questions, just called her old college roommate Jules, a chemist. "We'll get answers," she promised, taking the bottle like evidence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open, writing everything I could remember. The glass, the smell, my mother's smile. I titled the file "The Smile That Didn't Mean Love." My hand shook, but the words spilled fast. For the first time, I wasn't trying to explain it away. I was documenting. 2 days later, Helen texted me. "Jules says it's not just wine. She found traces of a strong sedative, enough to knock someone out cold if mixed with alcohol." I read the words 3 times, my pulse racing. There it was, proof that my instincts hadn't betrayed me. But I knew instinct in chemistry wouldn't be enough. Not against Margaret. She had built her life on appearances, on turning suspicion into paranoia. If I wanted to expose her, I needed more. Evidence she couldn't smile her way out of. And for that, I'd have to step back into her house. I told Noah I needed to stop by my mother's to pick up a box of candle holders we'd left behind. After the wedding, it was an excuse. Thin but believable. He offered to come, but I shook my head. If I was going to do this, I had to do it alone. Margaret's house looked exactly as it always had. Curtains perfectly pressed, hydrangeas blooming like porcelain against the porch, the faint sound of classical music leaking through the walls. To anyone else, it was serene. To me, it was a stage set. Inside, the air smelled of lavender polish. I moved quickly, slipping upstairs while she ran errands. My heart hammered as I opened the door to her private bathroom, a place she had always locked when I was growing up. The mirror reflected my pale face back at me, but I forced my hands steady as I opened the cabinet. Behind rows of lotions and vitamin bottles, I found 3 prescription containers, each with her name, each from different pharmacies: lorazepam, diazepam, and a third cycloprene, one I didn't recognize. The instructions warned of dizziness, fainting, and in bold letters, "Do not consume with alcohol." My chest tightened. I snapped photos of every label, every lot number. then folded the leaflet back exactly as I'd found it. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation, hers and now mine. I replaced everything, wiped the counter clean, and whispered to my reflection, "You're not her child anymore." On my way out, I grabbed the box of candle holders from the guest room closet to complete the alibi. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled away, but not from fear. For the first time, I felt control. That evening, Mr. Kent, the neighbor who'd lived across from us since I was a child, called me over when he saw my car in the drive. His voice was low, steady, when he told me he'd seen Margaret the night of the wedding. Gloves on, carrying a dark bottle, pouring liquid down the storm drain with the practiced calm of someone who'd done it before. Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was his handwritten statement, dated, signed. "Just in case," he said, as I tucked it into my coat. I realized the truth was no longer just mine to carry. I had witnesses now. 4 nights later, I set the table in my own dining room. 7 plates, polished glasses, linen napkins folded into careful triangles. To anyone passing by the window, it looked like a family dinner meant to heal old wounds. But every fork I laid down felt like a weapon. Every candle, a spotlight ready to expose what had been hiding in the dark. Noah poured water, his hand brushing mine with quiet reassurance. Emily arrived first, still pale but steady enough to walk on her own. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "I'm ready." Then came Helen, carrying nothing but her phone tucked in her pocket like a shield. Even Dorian, my old college love Margaret had once driven away, showed up, invited not for nostalgia, but for truth. Finally, Margaret stepped through the door. She wore silk the color of antique china, pearls glowing at her throat, a lemon tart balanced in her hands. "Families need rituals," she said sweetly, sliding into her chair like nothing had happened. Dinner began with small talk, voices polite, forks scraping softly. Then I stood. My knees were steady, my breath calm. "There's something I need to show you," I said, reaching for the remote I'd hidden in the drawer. The television flickered to life, grainy footage filling the screen. Margaret in the venue kitchen, 2 glasses on the counter, a small dropper bottle in her hand. She tilted it, 1 drop, then another, into the wine. She stirred slowly, then smiled at her reflection in the microwave door. The room froze. I clicked again. Photos of prescription bottles, dosage mismatched. Filled weeks before the wedding. Then Mr. Kent's written statement, projected larger than life. Finally, a page from an old journal of mine, highlighted. Why does she always know things I never told her? Silence swelled until it nearly cracked. "You drugged me," I said. My voice didn't shake. Margaret lifted her glass and took a sip, her eyes fixed on mine. "I protected you," she whispered. "From your poor judgment. From yourself." Emily's voice broke as she leaned forward. "Mom, it was me. I'm the one who drank it." Margaret turned to her, eyes cold, and said, "And you lived? Didn't you?" Gasps rippled around the table. And in that moment, the mask finally slipped. The silence after her words was louder than any scream. Emily's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Helen shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me as if to ask whether we should stop, whether this had already gone far enough. But I wasn't stopping, not when the truth was finally bleeding into the open. "You orchestrated every part of my life," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You chose who I could love, what music I played, even the clothes I wore. And when you couldn't control me anymore, you tried to erase me." Margaret's smile faltered, but only for a second. Then her eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. "I created you, Dahlia. Every inch of your taste, your sense, your standards. You are not free. You are a product of my discipline." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm done being your product." For the first time in my life, she had no immediate answer. The mask cracked, her face flickering with something raw, something close to rage. She stood slowly, pushing back her chair with a scrape that felt final. "Exposing me doesn't make you powerful," she hissed. "I can still undo everything you are." But I didn't flinch. Around me, the others sat frozen, caught in the weight of the moment. "You don't get to define me anymore," I said. My voice was steady, my hands no longer trembling. Margaret's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked to the door. Just before opening it, she turned back, her expression carved from ice. "This family was perfect," she whispered. "No," I replied. It was silent. "And we're done being quiet." The door closed with a finality that shook the walls. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Emily sobbed into her hands, and Noah pulled her into his arms. Helen looked at me like she'd just witnessed an execution. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight but unburdened. The truth had landed. The war wasn't over, not yet, but the silence that had once been my mother's greatest weapon, was broken. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shift. I was no longer her daughter trapped in a cage. I was Dahlia Mercer, and I was free to fight back on my own terms. The weeks after that dinner blurred together, but in the blur, I found something I hadn't felt in years: space to breathe. The air in my home was lighter. Conversations with Noah were freer. And when Emily called just to talk about nothing at all, I realized how rare that had been under our mother's watch. Margaret vanished from the circles she once dominated. Her name slipped quietly off community boards. Her place at Sunday brunches left unfilled. People who had once admired her began to avoid her, whispers replacing greetings. The silence she'd forced on us became the silence that defined her. Emily chose therapy, determined to stop burying herself under our mother's approval. Helen wrote about the subtle ways families can control each other, and for the first time, I saw our pain turned into something useful, something that might help someone else. And me, I found out I was pregnant. The test lay on the counter one quiet morning, 2 pink lines staring back at me. I thought panic might come, but it didn't. Instead, I felt grounded, as though a cord had been cut between past and future, leaving me free to write my own story. A month later, in the park, I saw her. Margaret stood near the playground fence, scarf pulled high, sunglasses masking her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, as though the power had drained out of her bones. Her gaze dipped to my stomach, where the swell had just begun to show. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she didn't direct the scene, didn't press her will on the moment. She simply turned and walked away. I didn't call after her. I didn't need to, because the truth was no longer tangled in her hands. As petals drifted down from the dogwoods, and Noah pressed a cup of iced tea into my palm, I whispered to myself, steady and sure, I used to live in her shadow. Now I stand where it doesn't reach.